Good evening, everyone. Today is February the 1st, and you are tuned in to the Resistance Radio Network, resistradio.com. This is, of course, the WideShut Webcast, and as always, I'm your host, Keelan Balderson. Be sure to check out all of my work, all of my articles and videos and whatnot. You can find all that at wideshut.co.uk. Now, before we get started today, I just want to let people know that the Tony Blair video that I said I was going to make is now online. I'll paste that into the chat for your reference. There we go. Basically, it's a mashup of all the times Tony Blair said Iran during the Iraq inquiry. Pretty much proving that he's a warmongering scumbag, but we all knew that anyway. And he has the nerve to promote another illegal war during the inquiry of an illegal war. You know, it's just totally nonsensical that this guy can get away with this stuff at this stage. But on this video, shows all the times that he said that Iran and all of his claims, and then at the end there's a debunking, which basically puts to bed the idea that Iran is a nuclear threat. They're not a nuclear threat, folks. And even if they had intent to be a nuclear threat, they're far behind a scientific level of actually creating a nuclear weapon and having it in a position to fire. And of course, the main destabilizing factor in the Middle East isn't Iran, it's actually the West, which it's always been. In fact, funding the terrorist group Jundallah in Iran to destabilize Iran. You know, the propaganda is just crazy. But enough about Blair, because once you start, it's hard not to go off into a rant. So I'll just move on. Coming up on tonight's show, I'll be talking to Aljosa Durnik. I hope I pronounced that right. I can see you in the chat room there. He's a member of the LaRouche movement. I decided to have him on because, you know, he has a slightly different take on the economy than what we had last week. Of course, I interviewed the economic assassin Graham Sharkey last week. We talked about the recession, the impossible national debt, China and the end of the dollar, investing in silver, lots of important issues. If you haven't listened to that show, you can check it out in the archive or on my YouTube channel. But the point on free markets that Graham made that caused a few listeners to disagree. So I thought it would be interesting to bring on somebody who did disagree with this concept of free markets, so we can get the other side of the argument. You know, because I don't claim to be an expert on these issues. I know what the problem is, but I think the solutions are open to debate and intelligent discussion. I mean, the mainstream media certainly aren't talking about new financial systems, are they? Despite it being mathematically impossible to pay off the national debt. We do need a new system, no doubt. And if they're not going to address it, then the hosts here at Resistance Radio certainly will address it. And my understanding is that the current system is a monopoly form of capitalism, where a few control the money and the markets. And the government essentially works for those elite because they prop up the system. The libertarian Austrian school idea is that they're calling for what is described as free market capitalism. And what that does is eliminate the too big to fails. You know, the big corrupt banks that we bail out. In quote-unquote real free market capitalism, there are no bailouts. If a bank fails because of its dodgy dealings and its derivatives and fake money, then it fails. And I'm obviously all for that. But the LaRouche movement have pointed something out, and what Aljosa pointed out to me is that free markets, do they really do anything to stop the giant corporations? They actually lead to an even bigger corporate takeover. And I think that's a fair point and something that we should bring into the debate, because, you know, if we had real respectable government, then we wouldn't be in this mess. But is taking government out of the picture going to cause an even bigger mess and remove our power to use government to rein in the system? You know, I think it's a fair point. I don't think I've personally fully grasped either side, so this is education for me as well. And I think it's important to hear lots of different people's solutions. So I'll be discussing that with our guest, among other things, in a few minutes. But something else that's kind of relevant to this debate is the new Zeitgeist movie, which I happened to watch yesterday evening. And the Zeitgeist movement obviously is further than calling for free markets or not calling for free markets. Basically, Zeitgeist is about ending capitalism altogether and replacing it with a technologically advanced, resource-based economy. And I think maybe I'll get somebody from, maybe not high up in the Zeitgeist movement, but just somebody that's pro-Zeitgeist, you know, get them on next week to discuss that solution. Because there is a strong argument that any kind of capitalism ultimately favours an elite class. And I have to admit, the new Zeitgeist documentary was extremely powerful. They're very good at, you know, producing films. Whether the message is exactly what we should be following, I don't know, but their skill in creating a movie that invokes emotion is definitely there. And I do have my worries and concerns with a lot of people do. It's all very sci-fi, and the idea of utopias always invokes a sort of sense of unease, because we've seen so many movies, and the potential for it to go wrong is, I think, quite big. You know, I think a movement like that, with some nasty people co-opting it, could be disastrous. But at the same time, I don't think that's a reason not to fully hear out what Peter Joseph and the Zeitgeist crew are saying. The elite can co-opt anything. We have to fight for our freedom, remember. But I do understand people's concerns, because I have the same concerns. One quote in the film that jumped out at me was where it said, "The earth is a dictatorship." Now, I don't think that was, you know, some kind of nefarious thing that they put in there, but the rhetoric could be quite easily associated with elements of the Green Movement. Fascism to save the planet. You know, the recent headline from WideShut, IPCC says end democracy to save planet, where this Professor Sherman was talking about how authoritarianism is the natural state of the earth, because the earth basically dictates the parameters of what we can work within. And he was calling for a priest class of dictators that would control the world by the needs of Mother Nature. And some of the messages from the Green Movement and Zeitgeist seem to overlap. But I think what it comes down to is the current elite want to use the fraud of global warming to install a fascist New World Order. That's basically what the Club of Rome says. Zeitgeist doesn't want that elite power structure. And I think that's the important distinction. If you notice these sort of things cropping up in the film and it kind of made you worry, but if you look at it rationally, I don't think Zeitgeist is necessarily co-opted. I don't know what everybody else's view is on Zeitgeist. It kind of invokes mixed reactions within people. You know, some people just call it communism or whatever. I think maybe you haven't looked too deeply into it, if that's what you think. I mean, it could fall that way. You know, it's difficult. It's a hard thing to understand. The thing I find with Zeitgeist is that it is so incredibly complex that it almost seems like a pipe dream. There are so many ifs and buts, and it's all just an idea. You know, what if people rebel? What if the computers go wrong? You know, what if people get bored and just don't like it anymore? What if the elite co-opt it? What if we can't get to the technology required to build such a society? And you bring up these things, and supporters will often say, well, in Zeitgeist, that won't happen because blah, 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 and you obviously haven't looked into it deep enough. You know, I just said that myself, but you don't know how it's going to play out because it's just something on paper. And on paper, we can all dream about perfect worlds, but in action, there are so many hurdles. You're not going to be able to convince everybody that it's a good idea to start with. And forcing people, you know, that's a whole different avenue that brings up all sorts of other questions. You know, when does education become indoctrination? You know, whatever. And I think another problem with the Zeitgeist movement is the fact that they've been so anti-religion that they alienated that religious wing of the truth movement who reject the rest of Zeitgeist because that one of the early films obviously got some of their facts wrong in the religious section. And you can't blame people who are religious who see that and then think this is some kind of Illuminati plot, because it was the original Bavarian Illuminati that wanted to end religion and were all for a scientific elite class. So you can see why people make that connection. And there's all sorts of fear about maybe they're part of the New Age movement. You know, I don't know. I think it's worth discussing. I think it's worth debating. But I think the main point is at least millions of people now who've seen this film are actually debating solutions to the current system and are admitting that the current system failed. And that's a good thing. Is Zeitgeist perfect? Probably not. But I'm willing to hear them out, just as I'm willing to hear the economic assassin the other week, or just as I'm willing to hear Aljosa of the LaRouche movement tonight. It's all about discussing the next step, because the current system has failed. So with that in mind, I'm just going to check if our guest is on the switchboard. Yep, I can see him up there. I'll bring him on in a minute. Just for those that don't know, he runs the Tepstalog YouTube channel. I'll just paste that into the chat room so you can check out some of his videos. Okay, so here we go. Can you hear me, Aljosa?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You're on the air, sir.
All right.
Thanks for taking the time out to come on the show.
Yeah, no problem. I always like to help to explain things if I see to explain things that I know of, and to people like you, as you like to research things a lot, and I've seen that you're pretty good at it, and so I love to help. Sure.
Good stuff. Well, one of the main reasons I brought you on the show today is that I want you to address your view on free markets and the Austrian school. Sure. The LaRouche view on how free markets wouldn't solve the financial crisis. You were debating the issue on my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And a term you used was that free markets could lead to fascism. So maybe that in a little more detail. You know, what brought you to these conclusions, and what is your overall view on free market capitalism?
Well, free market is essentially is fascism. This is fascism. That's the whole essence of it. In fact, when I explain the free markets now, in these few minutes, you'll probably understand what I'm talking about. But first, before we start, I would like to possibly explain a thing or two about the LaRouche movement, and as you were talking about the Zeitgeist movie before, right? And you were saying that you're afraid that the movement was co-opted, and you're 100% right on that. It was co-opted. It is co-opted. And it's actually pushing forward the main idea of the LaRouche movement, with one difference: that LaRouche movement has this done in detail, and it has researched the solutions, and it has them on the plate and prepared to start using them. While the Zeitgeist movement, it's actually a pipe dream. There's nothing, there's no substance there. And
that's an interesting view. I mean, what leads you to believe that Zeitgeist is co-opted? I know it's an idea, and I believe that it could be co-opted, but what's the rationale behind that?
Okay, for example, I haven't seen the third part yet. I've seen the second one, and for example, you could see there this character Bertrand Russell. Few people like this Bertrand Russell and some wrong ideas, like the idea of free markets and stuff like that. I mean, every serious researcher knows that free market is, and always was, like the main weapon of the British Empire. I mean, this financial empire, and especially this British East India Company, for centuries. And free market was the way. I mean, they could come, and they came into a country, and they actually flooded the markets with these cheap slave labor goods, and so with this they actually destroyed the market there. People couldn't actually produce anymore for the same price, and actually they had either stop producing, or I mean.
One of your videos on the Tepslog YouTube channel is about California. That's probably a more contemporary example to give your idea on the free market approach. So you think the California situation was due to the free markets? Maybe you could go into that into some more detail.
Well, actually, every situation is on free markets, and I could start now. Like, for example, world is governed by an empire. The empire has existed in European civilization since the period of the Peloponnesian War, which certain monetary interests, money interests as such, have been higher in rank than governments. Sometimes this has taken the form of an empire as such, but today's empire are not empires of governments as such. They are empires of consortia of financial interests and monetary interests. You have institutions, especially in a so-called free market, which is the worst form of government imaginable. In a free market, so-called, the monetary interests are above government. International financial monetary interests are higher than government. These governments control the currency, the monetary system of the world and of nations, and this is what constitutes a real empire. People above governments, controlling government, where government are supposed to respect the free market. And the free market is the system of slavery of governments. It is that world monetary system, a so-called free market system, which is now crashing. And this would be the system of the Inter-Alpha group of the City of London, for example, right? As long as we continue to accept the existence of that debt, which is the international monetary debt, under this system, civilization worldwide is doomed. Today we are bombarded with propaganda about the benefits of the free market, in which the free markets are somehow wiser than the citizenry. In fact, there is little that is free about this free market, which is dominated by powerful global financial interests who use their financial power and inside information to manipulate the system to their advantage. In their hands, globalization is not freedom, but a deadly weapon.
I guess a good thing to do here would be perhaps describe to the listeners what free market capitalism actually is. I mean, I'm not sure everyone is fully aware of what free market capitalism is, so maybe you could sort of, from your view, explain the basics of it And then
the financiers attempted to run through their imperial scheme under the guise of the various fascist movements in the 1920s and 30s, using the Nazis in Germany, the Synarchists in France, the Fabians in Britain, and the Mussolini corporates in Italy, among others. This drive failed when Hitler turned on his masters and attacked Europe instead of Russia, leading to the defeat of both himself and Mussolini, along with widespread destruction in Europe. This combined with the defeat of a fascist plot inside the U.S. to overthrow President Franklin Roosevelt in 1932, caused the oligarchy to regroup and prepare the ground for another attempt. What we know today as globalization is the cornerstone of their new attempt at global domination. You see, they use like these false prophets like Adam Smith and Thomas Malthus, both of whom were propagandists for the British East India Company and British Empire, like the globalization pushers of today, lying in the service of the empire. The world they are seeking is actually the world they are telling us is inevitable unless we capitulate to their demands. Knowing that growing world populations are a threat to their control of the world, they seek to impose control over nations. To impose austerity and shortages combined with higher prices, along with more direct measures such as plagues, famine, and wars, to cut global population significantly. Starting with the darker-skinned people, globalization is not just fascism, it is also genocide. The intent of these imperialists is to make every nation dependent upon their world company apparatus. This is why the corporations have stripped the U.S. of its manufacturing capacity, and doing the same in UK, and have decimated the family farmers, while retailers like Walmart were designed to run small and medium-sized operations out of business, while at every turn the U.S. is weakened economically, and the same the other countries in the world as well. It's happening all over in the same time and in the same fashion. Except, of course, for finance, where we are assured that the bubble will be our salvation. That too is another illusion, fed to us by people who think we are too stupid to see through their lies and too cowardly to challenge them. What kind of financial system we would need is another thing. But yeah, okay, you asked.
Well, I know LaRouche advocates the Alexander Hamilton of banking, and I know there's some controversy there. What's the difference? Just explain to people what the difference is between a Hamilton national bank and, for example, the Federal Reserve, which is a private central bank. You probably know most people would cite Hamilton as the founder of the system we have, but that's not strictly true. It was probably more that his idea was co-opted and sort of bred into the private system. Maybe you can go into that into some detail. You're
right on spot with this one. Sure, it was co-opted as many other like ideas, like the Franklin Roosevelt works and everything was also co-opted and actually turned against him, right? Yes, Hamilton, he actually made this national banking. This means, we actually have the real national reserve instead of, real national bank, instead of having this Federal Reserve like we do now, that is actually not owned by people of the United States. It's actually owned by private bankers. And it uses monetary system, right? But the Hamilton's idea was to actually change the system and to put in place the credit system, the fixed exchange rate, the internationally fixed exchange rate credit system. Credit system actually means that each country issues its own credit, therefore money, right? And it owns that money and all that, but because of that, there are no interest that will actually occur.
Basically, I think your argument
right?
is that if we get a respectable government, then government intervention is not a bad thing. I think you're saying that if we take away the concept of government getting involved in economics, then we have runaway corporations at an even worse rate than we have now. Is that your basic argument?
Definitely. You see, this is the reason why this this is the whole reason why we are in the crisis of today. It's because of deregulations. This is the lack of government interference, right? We have the problems we have today. For example, the Glass-Steagall law that would actually put down like in the 99 or something, right? Actually, all this is possible because with this law, it was impossible for different financial institutions, to be in one person or to actually make all these derivatives, that we have today possible, because today you can have, the financial banks, then the commercial banks, and possibly insurance companies or even these hedge funds or something. You can have all of them under one company, for example, under one name, and they can actually, of course, they can manipulate markets, in many different ways, and therefore they can make this, this big derivatives bubble of today possible in the first place, because. You wanted to
I guess you're not a fan of Ron Paul then. You would rather.
Well, you see, Ron Paul. The father, right? Not Rand Paul.
No.
To me, yeah, of course. He's not such a bad person or anything. It's just that I'm not sure that he actually understands what the free markets are and what Austrian economics really is. Since he's actually talking about, this von Mises or von Hayek or people like that, that are actually one of the main proponents of this Austrian school, like they were like, I don't know, his gurus or something, right? But I'm not sure that he's actually understanding the real Austrian economics or the goal of Austrian economics, which is, of course, free markets, and it is fascism. I know more on that, on this Austrian economics. If you want later or something.
I think it's a fair point that you make. I do understand the concept that if we completely deregulate everything, then the corporations can get away with what they want. But of course, I think it's worth debating. But I guess we can talk now a little bit about the LaRouche movement as a whole. For those that don't know, LaRouche has ran in 8 presidential elections. He's spoken out about Zionism and the ADL. He's spoken out about 9/11 being an inside job. And he puts the power structure on the British side of things, the royal family, British intelligence.
Yeah.
And, that's a claim I've heard a number of times. I personally don't put everything on one group. I think it's a combination of groups. But just tell us the ideas of the LaRouche movement. What would you tell somebody that's never heard of LaRouche? What would you explain to them?
Well, this is the movement actually made, its main objective is actually to inform, actually to educate, to thoroughly educate future leaders, for all over the world, but really educate them, not indoctrinate them, right? There's a big difference. Since when LaRouche is talking about something, then you can be pretty sure that all of his claims, are very well documented on the site at the same time, and will be documented, very thoroughly and deep. You won't hear him say something wild accusation, if you will, right? Without having this really backed up with evidence, and really deep, thorough evidence that you wouldn't find, anywhere else. And you do have all of this if you go to the LaRouche PAC site. So if he's saying that Obama is a Nazi or something, right? You can be pretty sure that there's a good reason for that, and that it is true.
That's the healthcare thing, right?
Yeah, there's a healthcare.
Maybe you can get into that.
I can, but you wanted to hear about the UK first, right? I mean, the view,
UK. Well, yeah, I would say in the UK, what we have right now is this concept that they call the big society, which is basically where, because, you know, we've got this massive national debt, they're selling things off to the private sector while making these huge cuts.
Exactly.
So maybe you can talk about that.
Sure. You see, the national debt has nothing to do with people and is therefore fraudulent. This is a gambler's debt. It's a gambling debt. And this gambling debt, under the Glass-Steagall law, which needs to be enacted back it needs to be enacted in order for this crisis to start diminishing. Under the Glass-Steagall law, most of these gambling debts that we are now supposed to pay, right, the normal people, even though we had nothing to do with them, right? These are nothing more than gambling debt, you know, and now they're expecting from us that, yeah, sure, we'll pay them. But no, we didn't make them, and under the Glass-Steagall law, these debts could never come into existence, right? And therefore, they make this trick, you know. They first make this debt with gambling, actually, right? When the financial
you're talking about the derivatives and all that.
Yes. The financial banks use our money, right? The money of let's say the commercial bank's money, right? The financial bank uses the commercial banks. The commercial banks are the banks that we normal citizens work with, right? And the financial part of bank uses this commercial bank's money for gambling, right? And after that, you know, it loses big or something, right? And these are the derivatives, right? This is how the derivatives came about. Therefore, and when they lose big and all that, then they come back to the commercial bank. Yeah, they come back to us, and they want the money that they lost gambling from us, the normal citizens. We have nothing to do with them, with this debt. And like if we would actually check these debts through the Glass-Steagall principle, you know, we would see that not more than maybe 2% of all those debts would actually be the still existing debts, you know, the ones that we would have to pay. But then, you know, when we do, we go for cuts and all that, right, in the society. It doesn't mean that we will ever fix the problem or the crisis that we're in now. Quite the opposite. It actually means that we will make sure that the crisis will proceed, and this is where the Austrian economics comes in from the other side, apparently, right? But it's not from the other side. It's the same thing. Austrian economics is this. This is Austrian economics, the cuts and all that. And it's impossible. It's impossible in any way, and it never happened anywhere in the history of the humanity that this type of reforms would actually solve anything. It's impossible. The only way to
absolutely, I agree. I mean, it is mathematically impossible to pay off the national debt through cuts or anything. It's only a fraction on the interest.
Yes, but not only that. That's one side of it. More than that, it's the actually the situation that we're in. That the national state, you know, the sovereign national state. That it should be is in like the normal people, and this means that when we do the cuts, the chances of ever coming out of this situation actually diminish. You know, every time that we cut something, you know, we actually make ourselves, you know, how to say.
Well, I guess the $1 million question would be: how do we get a government that would be accountable and would do the things that we need to do to prevent this? Because, I mean, it's all good saying we need a government that will put these measures in place, but how do we ever end up getting that? Because most of the time they're just bought and paid for.
Sure. Yeah, well, by by enacting Glass-Steagall, the worldwide Glass-Steagall law, this would be the first step, and it would be needed because once we would do this, we would make this actually the Inter-Alpha group of banks, which actually is the core of the British Empire as we know today, right? And they actually control like 70% of these financial assets and all that, right? And if we enact the global Glass-Steagall law, we actually cripple them. I mean, we make them, unexistent. They can't exist after we enact this law, and not to mention that this British Empire, in form of Inter-Alpha and all that, is actually also crumbling. It's actually bankrupt. If somebody decides not to pay this fraudulent debt, right? And when we decide, this means that if we implement a global Glass-Steagall, we actually decide not to pay this fraudulent debt. And this way, the whole Inter-Alpha structure will crumble immediately. This would actually cause a domino effect. For example, you see in Ireland, right? This Sinn Féin party, right? They actually they listen to LaRouche, and they are trying to implement this law and actually to recall this bailout and all that, right?
Interesting.
And yes, and this would actually cause a domino effect, and it will cause. Sooner or later, it has to happen, because this is actually the only way out. Because all of these debts, not to mention that all the money in the world could never pay all these debts, because they're just the whole money combined in the world, right? It's so much bigger that it's impossible in any way. It will never be paid. It can't be paid.
Well, yeah,
and it shouldn't be paid.
I don't think anybody here would disagree with that. It is absolutely mathematically impossible to pay any of it back, and it's ridiculous that we'd ever think that that's a way of doing it. So, I absolutely agree with you there. One thing I want to talk to you about is we talk a lot. Well, LaRouche talks a lot about the British Empire. I think it's important to clarify to people that we're not necessarily talking about the British people. We're talking about
not at all.
The city of London,
sure.
royalty.
Yeah.
So, and one thing I
can
want to bring up to you is the book Dope Inc., which you actually pointed out to me. And one of my articles that I wrote for WideShut was on the history of the opium trade and how the British East India and all that were the big drug dealers, and now we have Afghanistan as the leading opium exporters. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. You see, the British Empire as such, of course, this has nothing to do with British people at all. Their weapon is also the opium trade. For example, we had in the 19th century, you had 2 opium wars, for example, right, in China. And then I mean, they still control opium, but not only that, the financial system of British Empire. See, the British Empire is actually a financial system, a monetary system. A monetary system as such that as we know today, this is actually a British Empire. Not some armies or things like that, not at all. It's actually
that was the model that, the banks were the model that everywhere else took over afterwards. It's a monetary empire. Yeah, carry on.
Exactly. Yes, and this is the power of the empire, and this essentially is empire. And the opium trade, right? It comes in because this system, the monetary system, the collapse of the system is actually built in its structure, right? And because of that, it needs some other source of financing. And this would be the opium trade. Also, the opium trade isn't only, a means to finance the system, although it is, but this opium trade can also, be done and be made in this way because of this system. It wouldn't be possible to have all this opium trade without this monetary system that we have today. And like the city, for example, the city of Dubai, and before that, Shanghai, right? And then now it was Dubai and
how do they launder the money? How do they launder the money from the opium trade? Is that washed in the city of London, or?
For example, in Dubai, you have a lot of these, big structures like those big hotels and things that will never actually pay themselves off. I mean.
Yeah.
And this is because of the opium trade. This is actually the laundry for the opium trade, Dubai, right? And all of this, they would use like the banks of Cayman Islands or the banks in some other parts of the system where something would be allowed, and wouldn't be, for example, it wouldn't be. A crime, to do something, and
because it's all interlinked, then it eventually gets into the system. I understand. Okay.
Yeah. So through all those banks, and they have certain regulations there. For example, look into it, impossible, right? And they would just, sneak this into the system somewhere. But the thing is that because of the nature of this system, this couldn't actually never be point to or found so easily, because there's tons of money that comes into the system by the default of these systems, since it's made in this way that enormous amounts of money just come into existence from manipulations through or this derivatives stuff and everything, right? This would actually make this income from dope trade actually impossible to trace, right? But in this book, Doping Incorporated, right, the LaRouche's book, there you can actually find the real addresses, the real banks, the real, everything that you would need to perform a good investigation.
In that regard, what do you think about WikiLeaks? Because I know there's an idea that it is controlled by the elite, but at the same time, it recently came out that WikiLeaks are going to start releasing account details of people that have been having offshore accounts and stuff. Maybe that can lead to, or are they controlled? What's your opinion on that?
No, of course they are controlled. Of course they are actually, they're definitely controlled. There's no, there's no doubt about that. But you will see only information leaked, against some of their own enemies or something, You will not get the information there that. We would bring this system down. They don't even talk. Well,
we've seen that with Iran. They kind of released information that was targeting Iran. So I can see that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is like it's the same thing as this Pentagon Papers. All these years ago, right? The real goal of the Pentagon Papers was not to tell what's happening there in Vietnam so much as it was, to actually some different ideas inside, like the Iran now, right? To install something, inside something that would actually make us to do some things that we otherwise wouldn't. Like, for example, now that we would actually attack Iran or something, right? Or maybe
so they hide certain problems within certain pieces of truth. So
yes. But as you saw in WikiLeaks, right, there was nothing serious against against Israel or states that actually do a lot of terror around the world, or the U.S. or especially not UK, because you see the empire would always use, of course, it would use the U.S. for example, of course through Wall Street. You see, Wall Street is merely a child of London, right? They would always use, insurances between them, right? So that in the end, it would come out that the Israelis did it, or the U.S. did it, or whoever else did it. But most of the time, it generally comes from London. From this system. That's it. And it's not, you see, it's not even only British system or anything. This is actually, it's a group of international bankers, and they just have the center. They're just centered in London, and of course they control British government in many aspects too.
And of course, the City of London is practically a private corporation with its own private police force, and it recently came out, for those that don't know, that somebody whose wife had an affair with one of these top bankers was actually raided by anti-terror police. So they've basically got the police at their fingertips. It's a private army, basically, to them.
Sure.
So, I mean, we've got a few minutes left. Maybe you can address the age-old buzzword to throw around about LaRouche. They call it a cult, or when we talk about the New World Order.
Gladly. You see, since 1979, when this Doping Incorporated book was issued, right? Came out. Since then, there was this active, how to say, group of people working on the destruction of LaRouche, because LaRouche is a quite great danger, to this British Empire, and it's actually one of the rare peoples in the world that is actually that can actually bring down the empire as such, because he knows all this information about it and all that. So therefore they used different agents, to actually kill his character, to assassinate LaRouche's character, essentially. Not only that, he was also imprisoned in I think it was in 89 or something, under false accusations of tax evasion or something, under Bush Senior, right? And besides that, there were numerous assassination attempts on him, and all these things. But today we have this, there was this, how to say, a trial, against LaRouche, accusing him that he had something to do with this Jeremiah, or I don't know what, British,
what do you make of that BBC documentary about this? I'm
coming. I'm coming to this. And there was this trial in the States, against LaRouche, him being, responsible for this Jeremiah's death and all that. And of course, this trial, came into an end just recently, and it came out that it was like a fraud, the people that wanted to accuse LaRouche and all that, they came out guilty of disrespecting the court, because it was actually all made out of thin air. All the internet activity and all that, it was all done by a small group of people, connected with the elites, right? And financed by the elites, and also they're also connected with the WikiLeaks, not WikiLeaks, the Wikipedia's editor and all that. And they actually made that Wikipedia site of LaRouche claiming to be a cult and blah blah blah. But the thing is that whoever goes to investigate this into a slightest form, this person would soon see the enormous idiocracy of this, claims, because they have, of course, nothing to do with the reality, nothing, at all. They're so.
It's not like it's Scientology or anything, is it? It's just a political movement.
Yeah, exactly. But whoever goes to LaRouche and see the things for himself, he would discard his claims immediately. But then again, if you want to go to Wikipedia to see what the Destiny movement is, or is that a cult or anything, you would strangely find almost nothing about that, right? And there is a cult, right?
I guess you could call the belief in the private banking system a cult, or when they all go to Bohemian Grove and stuff.
Sure. They would like to. they would like for this to be the fact, but of course it is not. It is pure fact. And when talking about LaRouche, there is no researcher that I ran into. I mean, during all these years of investigations and everything, that would come close by a mile. When you say, I mean, if we ask about researches, for example, Webster Tarpley, I don't know if you know that or not. Well, he was...
he's a LaRouche supporter.
Sure. Then one day he just decided that he will go on his own, and that's it. But for example, he's also...
I think we're going to have to wrap it up there. We're literally only a few seconds left, so I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
It's been interesting to get a different view on things. Hopefully we can talk again sometime in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Bye.
Well, there we go, folks. That was Aljosa. Maybe a little bit of a language barrier there. He's from Slovenia. But I think it is interesting to get other people's opinions. So, there you go. We've got Cookie and the Rabbit Hole Orientation Show at 9:30. So, remember to come back and check it out. Cheers, guys.